Hello and welcome to the Hindu News Analysis by Bajirao IAS Academy. So, in this lecture, we will discuss the important news articles that are given in the Hindu newspaper. So, before discussing these articles, please subscribe to Bajirao IAS Academy YouTube channel and also hit the bell icon so that you will get all important updates regarding our classes. So, before discussing these articles, please let's try and attempt the yesterday given the practice question. Okay, the question is a closed economy is an economy in which the money supply is fully controlled, option A, and option B, a deficit financing takes place, option C, only exports takes place, option D, neither exports nor imports takes place. The correct answer for this question is option D. A closed economy is an economy where neither exports nor imports takes place, right? So this economy is completely closed and this economy will not have any trade with any other foreign country. Okay, so whatever the nation consumes produced by its citizens only, and it will not export and it will not import any raw material or finished goods from any other country. So this is the definition of a closed economy. As per the definition, a closed economy refers to a country that does not trade or engage in any financial exchanges with any other country. In case of India, India engages with bilateral trade with several other countries. So India is not a closed economy. Okay, so now we are living in a globalized world. So therefore, more and more countries have been engaging with each other and doing the bilateral trade as well. Okay, now please understand, so apart from this, that means no imports come from the country and no exports travel or no exports leave this country. The goal of closed economy is to complete self sufficiency. Achieving complete self sufficiency is actually the goal of the closed economy, and providing domestic consumers with everything they need from within the country's own borders. However, we are living in a more interconnected world, and closed economies are more of a theoretical concept because we are living in a more connected world, interconnected world, and a globalized world. The closed economy is a much more similar to a theoretical concept, but in reality or in practical terms, it is not, it is not a reality. So, although some economies are more closed than the other economies, so there are several other economies also, they are more inward looking or closed economies than the other countries. Okay, so this is all about the closed economy, and this is the today's practice question. Okay, so the practice question is the new start treaty. The new start treaty was in news. What is this treaty? So option A, it is a bilateral strategic nuclear arms reduction treaty between USA and Russian Federation. Option B, it is a multilateral energy security cooperation treaty among the members of East Asian Summit. And option C, it is a treaty between Russian Federation and European Union for the energy security cooperation. And option D, it is a multilateral cooperation treaty among the BRICS countries for the promotion of trade. See, the New START treaty was in news when US President Donald Trump was the president. Okay, so it was continuously in news. So therefore, try to answer this question and also write the correct answer in the comment section. Okay, so please answer these questions so that it will help you. Even if you don't know, you can search about these questions. What is the new start treaty and what is a closed economy, and try to know about that. And tomorrow I'll give the correct answer for this question. So let's discuss the all the important news articles. They are given in the Hindu newspaper. Okay, the first article is recently Prime Minister Narendra Modi visit to Australia is very significant, where he held bilateral, talks with the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. So, in this context, why it is important for India to engage with Australia in the changing geopolitical scenario. And the next article is making agri commodity value chain sustainable is tough. Okay, so there are different or a wide variety of agri commodities, and making their value chain sustainable, like more environment friendly, and they are able to deal with the climate change or achieving the climate resilience along with ensuring fair prices for the farmers and also for the consumers, how we can balance everything and why it is very tough. So we need to discuss all these things as part of this article. The next article is India said to triple speed of its fastest supercomputer. Now every nation have a faster supercomputers, right? So we India also have a supercomputer called Pratyush and Mihir. Okay, just remember these names, Pratyush and Mihir. These supercomputers have a wide variety of applications, ranging from weather forecasting to doing a complex mathematical, formulas, everything. So therefore, it is very important for us to have a supercomputers. Right. The next article is the global body keeps National Human Rights Commission waiting over a political meddling. There was a global human rights watch institution, right? So that was a global institution and that accreditates the national human rights bodies. Now, this body keeps National Human Rights Commission waiting over political meddling. Okay, so what is this article? We will discuss in a in-depth manner. And the next article is how a letter to PM was set off a search for Sengol. So Sengol was a symbol, and that was an instrument that was exchanged during the power, shift, okay, or power transfer. And that was a practice followed during the Chola times. And recently, the Parliament building was inaugurated. And during the inauguration of the Parliament building, the Sengol was instituted near the speaker's seat. Okay, so in this context, it is very important to understand what is Sengol. Sengol is new term, right? So therefore, there is a probability that you may get a question on this. So what is a Sengol? So we'll discuss the Sengol as well. Then the last article is independence of judiciary is part of the basic structure of the constitution. We very often hear about the basic structure doctrine that was propounded by the Supreme Court or that was invented by the Supreme Court during the Keshwanand Bharti judgment. So recently, Supreme Court has also come up with a judgment saying that the lower judiciary or the district level judiciary, independence is also part of the basic structure. So we will discuss all these articles in a detailed way. So the first important article is with respect to Prime Minister Modi's visit to Australia. Okay, so this was actually the sixth meeting of Prime Minister Narendra Modi with Australian Prime Minister Albanese. Okay, so this is actually the overall sixth on various meetings. For example, whether it is about the Quad meeting, G7 meeting, G20 meeting. Okay, so in the sidelines of all these, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Albanese, they have met six times in the past. Okay, so on this meet, there were several agreements took place and several other initiatives were also launched. And one such among them is Australian consulate, opening an Australian consulate in Bengaluru, and Indian consulate was also opened in an Australian city called Brisbane. Secondly, an agreement on migration and mobility was also signed during this meeting. Okay, so agreement on migration and mobility is very important. For example, India's workforce, looking for the opportunities in other countries as well, and Australia is one of the prime destination for Indians. So therefore, it is also very important to have such an agreement on migration and mobility because we have a huge demographic dividend and other countries have been suffering with the demographic shortage or workforce shortages. So in order to accommodate our workforce in a more sustainable way, we need to ink such agreements, an agreement on migration or mobility. And the next initiative was finalization of terms of reference for in India Australia green hydrogen task force. Now, green hydrogen is a promising fuel, right? So, because it is a more renewable form of fuel and it will help countries meet their climate goals or the climate commitments. So, therefore, India, along with Australia, they have set up a green hydrogen task force, and that will help make these two countries to make a faster transition into the clean fuels. And the next one is defense and security ties and cooperation on renewable energy and several other critical minerals. See, please remember Australia, India, Japan. These countries have been coming together. They have formed an alliance for the supply chain resilience. Okay, so they even formed the supply chain resilience network owing to the concerns from the China or concerns emanating from China. So therefore, India and Australia have also been working on cooperation in the area of critical minerals. Okay, so all these initiatives are part of the substantive agenda of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Australia. Okay, so apart from these issues, the bilateral issues, there were also several other international issues, and one such issue is the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And in Ukraine-Russia conflict, both Australia and India have a differing opinions. Okay, so they have a different opinions. So, despite having their different stances over invasion of Ukraine and the Western sanctions being imposed on Russia, so they found the continuing common cause of maintaining free and open Indo-Pacific and dealing with an aggressive China. So, for both these countries, the common concern is the aggressive and assertive China and Chinese belligerence in the Indo-Pacific region, and they have reiterated their commitment for free, open Indo-Pacific region. Now, in this context, we need to understand the relations, but the bilateral relations between India and Australia. What are the important areas of cooperation, and what are the issues, and what will be the way forward in these relations? Now, highlighting the bilateral relationship between India and Australia. So, what is the context? Context is recently Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the visit to Australia and met the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Okay, so after the meeting, there were several agreements and there several initiatives were launched, and we already discussed those initiatives. Okay, now, so the importance of India for Australia. Okay, so what is the importance of India for Australia? So it can be gauged from the fact that in 2018, Australian government commissioned the India Economic Strategy. Okay, so Australian government in the year 2018 signed India Economic Strategy to cement India as a priority economic partner. Because after the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a strain in relationship between Australia there was a strain in relationship between Australia and also China. Okay, earlier they used to have a close economic ties and over reliance of Australia on China, and in fact, China is largest trading partner for Australia. But after the COVID-19 pandemic and after 2015, due to several such concerns, Australian government have launched the new economic strategy, India Economic Strategy, in the year 2018. The objective of this India economic strategy is to make India as a priority economic partner. Now, India is Australia's fourth largest trading partner, and both countries have signed. They are not discussing, but they have already signed the comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. So, apart from Australia, India also signed recently the comprehensive economic partnership agreement with United Arab Emirates as well, and we are discussing the free trade agreement with the European Union and the United Kingdom, and also with Canada. Okay, now, apart from this, when it comes to the political cooperation between Australia and India, so both support the multipolar world order. Multipolar world order. So the world order is not dominated by any single country, either China or USA, or not even two countries. Okay, not bipolarity or unipolarity. They support multipolar world order, and Australia has continued to support India's claim for permanent membership at United Nations Security Council. Even though in the G4 grouping, Australia is not a member, Australia continues to support India's membership or India's permanent membership to United Nations Security Council and Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation and the reforms in United Nations. Okay, so India is part of the East Asia Summit. Okay, India is part of the East Asia Summit, but India is not a member to Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. So therefore, Australia has been supporting India's membership for UNSC and Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and also reforms in the multilateral institutions like UN. So, other areas of political cooperation include the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue on Eastern Asia, and this is also known as the Quad grouping, where USA, India, China, Japan, and Australia are member countries. Okay, so this Quad grouping, India and Australia play an important and very critical role. Okay, so they play very important and a critical role to discuss ways to balance China's growing ambitions in the Indo-Pacific region. Okay, so China's growing ambitions in the Indo-Pacific region. So apart from this, the highlights of the bilateral relationship between these two countries include, so to get unrestricted uranium supply, because Australia is one of the largest uranium producing countries. So therefore, India, even though not a member of non-proliferation treaty, okay, so nuclear non-proliferation treaty, so both these countries have been looking to get more and more uranium supplies to India. So okay, to get unrestricted uranium supply, and also India signed a nuclear cooperation agreement with Australia, okay, which came to be in force in the year 2015. Okay, so India also signed a civil nuclear cooperation agreement with Australia in 2014, and that came into force in the year 2015. Okay, you have to remember all these facts. These facts are very important: the quadrilateral security dialogue and the members of it, and when Australia and India have signed the civil nuclear cooperation agreement, etc. So apart from this, this will provide a greater market access. The comprehensive economic cooperation agreement that we are talking about, and the comprehensive economic cooperation agreement will provide a greater market access to exporters of goods and services. Okay, so we export goods and we export services. See, earlier India was part of the negotiations in regional comprehensive economic partnership. However, due to China and the fears of domestic or dumping of goods from countries like China, India was withdrawn from the negotiations of regional comprehensive economic partnership. However, India has been showing interest to be part of the a forum for the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Okay, so the forum for Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, that is actually US-led framework. Okay, now India has been mostly going for the bilateral trade agreements or the bilateral free trade agreements where it have the competitive advantage. So therefore, this will provide a greater market access to exports of goods and services and remove the non-tariff barriers. So there are different non-tariff barriers like phytosanitary measures and sanitary measures, and they are applicable on goods which are produced by any country. Okay, so removing the non-tariff barriers and encourage investment and address the border restrictions for trade. Okay, so these are the issues, or these are the advantages of the comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. Now, apart from the political engagement and the economic engagement, civil nuclear cooperation between these two countries, both Australia and India have a multiple robust mechanisms to engage in key areas or important areas like cooperation in defense, energy security, education, sports, etc. Okay, so there were joint efforts from both these countries to counter China and the Chinese assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region and constitute the pillars of a strategic partnership. Okay, so they wanted to have a close strategic partnership and also contain Chinese assertiveness and belligerence in the Indo-Pacific region, and both these countries have committed to a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Okay, so strengthening relations with Australia. So what are the areas we need to focus? India need to focus in order to strengthen relationship or relations with Australia. Okay, so need and challenges. However, please understand both countries can bilaterally and multilaterally. For example, when it comes to multilateral engagement, quad grouping. So they can bilaterally and multilaterally, uh, as quad, balance the aggressiveness of China in the region and serve together as a net security provider in the region. India is traditionally known as the net security provider in the region, in the entire Indian Ocean region. So okay, so in the entire Indian Ocean region, where India and Australia can leverage their capacities, the capabilities to become the net security providers in the entire Indo-Pacific region. Okay, so India is generally known for anti piracy operations, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief in case of any disasters like tsunamis, floods, cyclones in any part of the country in the Indo-Pacific region. Okay, so apart from that, India's unfavorable trade balance with Australia. Now we import more from Australia rather than exporting more to the Australia. So therefore, India has been maintaining unfavorable trade balance with Australia, and this has remained as an unresolved. This is not yet addressed, and this is unresolved issue, and this has to be addressed, and the trade should be balanced. Okay, So the comprehensive partnership with Australia can help India in several ways. Now how it will help India? So both these countries can work on common issues like transnational crime, terrorism, people smuggling or human trafficking, and illegal fishing. Okay, so illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing, so they can work on these areas. Now apart from that, use Australian expertise in the field of health, education and tourism for Make in India program. India launched the Make in India program in the year 2015. We all know about it. So in order to improve the Make in India program and its capacities, we can use or we can leverage the Australian expertise in the field of healthcare, education, and tourism. Now, apart from this, India chooses to join the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. However, India was withdrawn from the negotiations of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. However, the door is still open for India to be part of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Okay, so these countries comprises of 10 Asian member countries plus 6 Indo-Pacific countries. So that includes China as well. Now, the way forward between India Australia relationship, what should be the way forward? So this is a changing Australia's economic strategy towards India. Okay, so Australia even launched India economic strategy in the year 2018. So there was a visible shift in Australia's economic strategy towards India, and this has recommended that India should put in its top 3 export markets and be made the third largest destination in Asia for the country's outward investment. Okay, so for example, Australia is investing in any other country, India should be a top priority or topmost priority. Okay, now apart from that, the way forward has also been suggested. Now, India Australia relationship was often labeled as one step forward, two step back. So there was a one step forward and followed by two step backward. So this has to be dealt with, or this has to be addressed. Secondly, India no longer sees Australia at a periphery of India's vision, but the center of its thoughts. Now, in fact, India has also launched the Act East policy. Okay, as Act East policy. Now this is also part of the Act East policy, and India has also launched the Sagar policy, security and growth for all in the region, the Indo-Pacific region, and Act East policy. The integration of the convergence of both these policies to have a greater engagement and a greater cooperation with Australia is very significant. Now, India has no longer seen Australia as a periphery, rather center of its thoughts. The positive shift in relations since 2014, after the gap of 28 years, should be continued and extended in several other areas which were not yet seen a significant cooperation between Australia and India. Now, there are several other opportunities as well and challenges in strengthening India and Australia relationships. So, what are those areas? So, these three pillars should be strengthened to keep the momentum in ties. So, these pillars include economic relationship, geostrategic congruence, and people to people ties need to be engaged. So recently there was an issue where the few Khalistani elements have attacked Hindu temples and also attacked the Indian embassy, and they are even anti-Modi, anti-government chants. So that was something where the ties between India and USA would get impacted. So therefore, Australia need to act on those things as well, or anti-India elements as well within Australia. So this is all about India and Australia ties. So the next article is with respect to the agricultural commodities. Okay, so making agricultural commodity value chains sustainable is tough. Okay, so this is what this article has been saying that. Now, what are those agri commodities? We have several agri commodities like the cotton is an agri commodity. Okay, so and cereal pulses are all agri commodity, and sugar is an agri commodity. Now the emphasis of this article is to reduce the environmental footprint or the carbon footprint of these commodities on environment. Okay, so reduce the carbon footprint of these commodities and production pattern, processing patterns, and consumption patterns on environment. And secondly, make farmers earn better livelihood through the cultivation of these agriculture commodities, and also make sure the consumers should also get the commodities at an affordable price. Okay, so these three are very important stakeholders in the making commodities or agri commodity value chains more sustainable. But the article has been suggesting that it is a very tough, making agri commodities value chain sustainable is tough. So however, please understand, India has a long history of producing agricultural commodities. Okay, so India is also known as hub of global spices like tea, coffee, and India has also traded these commodities with several other countries in the past and now as well. So even during the Indus Valley civilization, India is known to cultivate cotton, wheat or rice and barley, etc. So therefore, India has a history of cultivating these commodities and trading with several other countries. So the scale and diversity have gone from strength to strength. Okay, so the total cultivation scale and the diversity of various commodities have gone from strength to strength over the particularly over last 3 decades. Okay, so in fact, the share of high value agricultural commodities have significantly increased in India's total GDP. Okay, so that has significantly increased over last 3 decades. Now, apart from this, the sector has been contributing to environmental degradation, and it is very important to understand the sector's contribution for the emission of greenhouse gases and how it has been leading to the environmental degradation. Now, when we are cultivating the commodities crops, there is a possibility that the farmers have been clearing forests. Okay, clearing forests. So, forests are traditionally known as a carbon sinks, and forests also have several multiplier effects on the environment and the sustenance of or the maintaining biodiversity in a given area. So therefore, the sector's contribution to environment degradation needs to be understood, and that include carbon emissions across the whole supply chain and also the injudicious use of water and chemicals while cultivating these commodity crops. So, which also threaten the long-term viability of the production of agricultural crops. Okay, so the commodity crops are those crops they primarily grown and sold for international markets rather than the subsistence purposes. These commodity crops are primarily grown and sold in the international markets for international trade. Okay, now, what are those commodity crops? Earlier, I have discussed a few commodity crops, and the other commodity crops which have the global significance include cotton, oil, palm, rubber, tea, coffee, cocoa, and soya bean. So, right. So these are the major crops which are known as the commodity crops, and Karnataka is the highest cultivator, the largest cultivator of coffee, and tea is Assam. Rubber is the southern India, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and palm oil and cotton as well. Right. So they are critically related to global sustainability challenges. Right. So these crops are related to global sustainability challenges because they do have a significant impact on the environmental degradation, whether it is releasing greenhouse gases, deforestation, etc. Okay, so the sustainability challenges include the drive against environmental and climate risks, and that include deforestation, biodiversity losses, freshwater depletion, and soil degradation. Okay, so these are the areas, or these are the challenges which are actually associated with the cultivation of commodities crops. So because of these challenges, making the commodities crops cultivation is a very tough or difficult. However, interventions in the production, trade, and consumption of these commodities will likely drive a transformational impacts on environmental sustainability in this sector. Okay, so it has been suggesting that there should be or there needs to be interventions in the overall production, trade, and consumption pattern of these commodities, and it likely drive transformational impacts on environmental sustainability across the sector. Now, apart from that, there has been given an example. Okay, so for example, expansion of cold storage facilities like to make export oriented commodities more competitive in a global market, this expected to increase energy demand. Okay, so for example, when we construct the cold storage facilities, right? So for storing of agricultural commodities, no doubt it is very good initiative, constructing such cold storage facilities to store products so that the farmers can discover better prices for their crops. However, these cold storages require an enormous amount of energy, Now, how you source this energy, whether from fossil fuels or from renewable sources? Okay, so this is very important question. Now, if you source energy from the fossil fuels to maintain the cold storages, then the commodities production or the storage is unsustainable. It can be called as unsustainable. On the other hand, if you produce energy or if you source energy from the renewable sources to maintain the cold storages, it could be called as a more sustainable way of managing or maintaining the cold storages and the overall commodities. So therefore we need to adopt these options like managing the cold storages with the renewable energy sources. That would make the commodities cultivation more sustainable. Okay, so estimating how this energy needs will be met through either through fossil fuels or renewable sources, and this likely determine the emissions associated with the commodity. Okay, for example, a commodity like cotton that has been stored in a cold storage. Okay, so even though there is no need for cotton to be stored in a cold storage, okay, so any other commodity crop, and imagine a coffee or tea, and that has been stored in a cold storage, and that sourced energy from fossil fuels, then the overall contribution of this commodity to the carbon footprint further increases. Okay, so further increases. So therefore there is a need to source energy for the cold storages from renewable energies to reduce the carbon footprint of these crops. Okay, so apart from that, the regionally some efforts have led to climate, biodiversity, and livelihood benefits. Okay, so while helping preserve our ecological heritage and production landscapes, so there were some regional efforts. Okay, so some regional efforts, and that were taken by the few regions in India, and that have led to climate, biodiversity, and livelihood benefits, and they also helping preserve our ecological heritage in the production landscapes. So one example has been given for this. The example is there is an evidence, and that has been suggesting that introduction of biodiversity friendly coffee in Karnataka. So we have I have already told you that Karnataka is a state with the largest production of coffee. So therefore introduction of biodiversity friendly coffee in Karnataka has mitigated a human animal conflicts in the region to a significant extent, okay, or to a major extent. Similarly, the public attention on millets through a declaration of international millets. So 2023 year 2023 declared as an international year of millets by the United Nations. Okay, so therefore similarly public attention on millets through declaration of international year of millets has helped widen the demand across Indian and international consumers. So millets are also some sort of commodity crops. Okay, so they are also some sort of a commodity crops. Now increasing demand for the millets in the domestic and international markets, or more and more consumption of millets by the consumers. So therefore there is a need to make these millets more and more environmentally sustainable first, and secondly it should be affordable for the consumers while they are purchasing or consuming millets, and third thing is that the farmers should be able to discover better prices for their millets or for their commodities. So therefore this will be a win-win situation for all of us. Now there has been a sudden spike in the demand for millets, so everyone started shifting towards, or farmers or consumers started shifting towards millet cultivation. But if we neglect the environmental considerations while cultivating millets, and that would lead to the environmental degradation. Okay, so that would also result in global sustainability challenges. Okay, because over a period of time, that what happens is that farmers will use more chemicals and more fertilizers, and farmers will also use herbicides in order to increase the production and the productivity, and farmers will also clear forests to cultivate millets, because there is an evidence that the tribal regions are mostly suitable for cultivation of millets, and shifting cultivation trends will also further increase, and that ultimately lead to the biodiversity loss. Okay, so even though after increase in the demand for the millets, there is a need to balance the farmers interest, consumer interest, and also the environmental sustainability, and that's where the success of the commodities sustainability lies in. Okay, so strong governance mechanisms and policies that support the value chain creation, or that in fact strengthen the value chains through subsidies, market access, and infrastructural support are the need of the hour. However, these policy or the governance mechanisms, policy interventions should take into account the environmental concerns as well. Okay, now as far as this environmental sustainability of millet or commodities cultivation is concerned, no initiative mitigate the environmental effects of agricultural value chains, the negative environmental effects of agricultural value chains. Uh, can be complete without benefiting the large number of people that depend on these value chains for sustenance, whether it is laborers, agricultural laborers, or farmers, consumers. They depend largely on these value chains. Okay, so they depend largely on these value chains for their sustenance. Okay, so no initiative to mitigate these environmental effects of uh, commodities or agricultural value chains would be complete. Even though the government has come up with several such initiatives, if those initiative does not address the concerns of the relevant stakeholders, farmers, consumers, laborers, and that would be meaningless. Okay, now, there were issues with working conditions and poor labor rights for the people who are engaged in these plantation works or the plantation crops. For example, coffee plantation, tea plantation, rubber cultivation. Okay, so there were working conditions, deteriorating working conditions, and labor rights. They are depressingly common in commodity value chains across India. It is not. It is a very common, not just with respect to the coffee or tea plantations, but also the entire production chain or entire value chain. It is more common and across the country in these sectors. Okay, so the success of any environmental sustainability initiative is depend on getting actors like them, like small and marginal farmers, labor, and their rights. So all these factors need to be taken into consideration, and there is a need to provide adequate safety nets for those people. Okay, so there is a need to provide adequate safety nets for those people, while also accounting for climate crisis effects on production process over the entire production process. Now, apart from that, there are ways through which a concerted and coordinated action or coordinated action have a positive impact on the climate value chains or the commodity value chains. So there is a need for overall concerted and coordinated action, and that will ultimately have a positive impact on the commodity value chains. So if some actions are combined with right kind of support systems, like while keeping equity and justice in mind, agricultural commodity value chains can deliver India's people and its environment as well. Okay, so this will be the ultimate solution for the above mentioned aspects. Okay, so there is a need for equity should be taken into consideration, justice should be taken into consideration while making governance policies or right kind of an initiatives or making support systems, and that will make the agricultural commodity value chains to deliver more India's people, and they are also in line with, or they are also in complaint with the sustainability norms of our environment. Okay, so this is all about this article. Now the next article is with respect to the dependence of judiciary is part of basic structure of the constitution. Now we often very often hear about the basic structure doctrine. Okay, the basic structure doctrine is an invention of basic structure doctrine is actually an invention of the judiciary in the Keshwanand Bharati case in the year 2000, sorry, 1973. Okay, 1973. So it was a judicial innovation. Now what is a basic structure? Basic structure is an essence of the constitution. Okay, so there are few parts which form the essence of the constitution. They form the bedrock of the constitution. They represent the constitutional morality, and the parliament or the legislature should not make any amendments, or the parliament should not have any power to make amendments to such a such provisions of the constitution, because that will significantly alter the constitutional provisions. Okay, so independence of judiciary is part of the basic structure of the constitution. Now we need to understand what exactly is a basic structure doctrine. Now the basic structure doctrine is the Supreme Court in Keshwanand Bharati judgment in the year 1973 laid down a new doctrine. Okay, so the Supreme Court has laid down a new doctrine, and the name of this doctrine is the basic structure doctrine. Okay, so the basic features of the Constitution. However, the Supreme Court has not yet defined or clarified what exactly constitutes the basic structure of the Constitution. So please remember this, the Supreme Court has not yet clarified what constitutes a basic structure. Even in the Constitution also, there is no mention of the basic structure, secondly. And third, no legislative enactment so far has defined what constitutes a basic structure. So please remember this. Now, from various judgments time to time, the following have been emerged as a basic features of the Constitution. Okay, so the below mentioned features are form part of the various features of the basic structure. So they include the supremacy of the Constitution, sovereign, democratic, republican nature of Indian polity, and the third aspect is secular character of Indian Constitution. Fourth, separation of powers between legislature, executive, and judiciary. Federal character of Indian Constitution, judicial review, freedom and dignity of individual, harmony and balance between uh, various institutions, and also free and fair elections, limited powers of parliament to amend the constitution are some of the features which are part of the basic structure doctrine. However, apart from that, the independence of the judiciary is also part of the basic structure doctrine. Okay, now in fact, the National Judicial Appointments Commission through the 1999 Constitutional Amendment Act, so that was formed to scrap the existing collegium system and forming a new judicial appointment commission to make appointments of a higher judiciary, was in fact struck down by the Supreme Court because it violates the independence of the judiciary. So therefore, independence of the judiciary is also a basic feature of Indian Constitution. Now we need to understand the basic structure doctrine and a brief history, how it has been evolved over a period of time. The first case was in the year 1951, Shankari Prasad versus Union of India. Now, in this case, the Parliament's power to amend the Constitution under Article 368 held to include the power to amend Part 3 containing the fundamental rights which are part of the Constitution. Okay, so this was the 1951 judgment delivered by the Supreme Court in Shankari Prasad versus Union of India case. So in this case, Supreme Court has held that the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution also extends to amending Part 3 fundamental rights of Indian Constitution. Now apart from that, in the year 1965, there was a Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan case. Okay, now, in this case, the parliament supremacy and its power to amend any part of the constitution upheld again by the Supreme Court in Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan, as similar to the Shankari Prasad versus Union of India case. Now, importantly, Madhulkar and Hidayatullah. So, Justice Madhulkar and Justice Hidayatullah were the dissent judges in the year 1965, and in the year 1967. Golaknath judgment versus State of Punjab. So we very often hear about the Golaknath judgment. Okay, so Golaknath judgment was in the year 1967. So in this judgment, there was a complete reversal. The court rules that the fundamental rights could not amended by the Parliament. Parliament have no power to amend the fundamental rights unless another constituent assembly was formed. Okay, so if another constituent assembly is formed and the constituent assembly has given the power to parliament, only then those fundamental rights could be amended by the parliament. But parliament have no power. As of now, the parliament have no power to amend the fundamental rights under uh, you know part 3 of the constitution. That was the Golaknath judgment in the year 1967. However, in the year 1971, the 24th Constitutional Amendment Act. Now, this 24th Constitutional Amendment Act mandated that Article 368 and Article 13 were modified to allow Parliament to unilaterally amend the fundamental rights, overturning the Golaknath ruling. Okay, so Parliament, by passing the Article 24th of the Indian Constitution, overturned or bypassed the judgment given by the Golaknath versus State of Punjab in the year 1967. So, the 24th Constitutional Amendment Act allows amending Article 368 and Article 13. Okay, so to further amend Article fundamental rights. Okay. Now, next, in the year 1973, Supreme Court has come up with a Keshwanand Bharati versus State of Kerala judgment. Okay, so court rules that all parts of the constitution, including the fundamental rights, can be amended, keeping the basic structure intact. Okay, so the parliament have to keep the basic structure intact. However, the Supreme Court has not defined what constitutes a basic structure, but Supreme Court held that Parliament have the power to amend any part of the constitution, but it has to keep the basic structure intact. However, in the year 1975, the 39th Constitutional Amendment Act was passed. Okay, so this was the emergency period in India. Okay, so the 39th Constitutional Amendment Act says that the election of the president, vice president, prime minister, and speaker placed beyond the scope of the judicial review in the backdrop of the emergency. Okay, so in fact, the election of the prime minister, former prime minister Indira Gandhi, president, vice president, and also speaker, that includes prime minister, so that kept beyond the scope of the judicial review in the backdrop of emergency. So in the same year 1975 itself, in Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan case, Supreme Court applied the basic structure doctrine. Okay, so Supreme Court first applied the basic structure doctrine in Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan judgment. Okay, so the court strikes down the amendment. The 39th constitutional amendment was struck down by the Supreme Court, and free and fair elections held to be part of the basic structure. And Supreme Court has also held that the free and fair elections are part of the basic structure, so therefore it has struck down the 39th Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay, so in 1976 the parliament has come up with the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Now this amendment has protected against being called in question by the any court. Okay, now apart from that, the parliament's constituent power to amend declared as limitless. The 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act declared that Indian Parliament have a limitless power to amend any part of the Constitution because it represents the general will of the public. However, the 1977 44th Constitutional Amendment Act has unchanged all of these, most of these amendments which were brought by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Now in the 1980 there was also an important judgment of the Supreme Court. So that judgment is Minerva Mills versus Union of India. Now in this case, the modifications rejected by the court, which clarified that the parliament's power to amend the constitution is limited by the constitution itself. Okay, so in Minerva Mills case, the Supreme Court held that Parliament do not have an ultimate power to amend any part of the Constitution. In fact, it is limited by the Constitution itself. Now, let's come into the article. So, independence of the judiciary is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, in this case, Supreme Court has been specifically talking about the independence of the lower judiciary or at the district level judges. Okay. The Supreme Court held that the independence of the district judiciary must also be equally part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Okay, so at the district level, judiciary is also equally part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, without impartial and independent judges in the district judiciary, justice that was actually a part of the preamble and a preambular goal would remain illusionary. And the district judiciary is in most cases also the court which most accessible to the litigant. So therefore, the lower judiciary or its judgments, or also or lower judiciary, independence of the lower judiciary is also part of the basic structure doctrine, and this is actually the judgment of the Supreme Court. Okay, and other important observations made by Supreme Court include that the vital to the judicial system is independence of judicial officers. Okay, so to secure their impartiality, it is very important to ensure their financial security and also economic independence. Apart from this, the judgment has also highlighted the doctrine that judiciary must possess an inherent power to compel payment of those sums of money which are reasonable and necessary to carry out its mandated responsibilities, right? So this is with respect to, there was a payment of you know salaries and pensions for the judges at the lower court, and this case is particularly with respect to that, and Supreme Court observations, some of the Supreme Court observations regarding the lower judiciary, a judiciary at the district level, and it is also comprises, or it is also part of the basic structure, or independence of the judiciary is part of the basic structure. Now the next article is with respect to India's supercomputers. Okay, India's supercomputers, right? So India set to triple speed of its fastest supercomputers. Okay, so India dramatically scale up its supercomputing prowess and installing 18 petaflop system over the course of this year. Okay, so total supercomputing capabilities of India will be dramatically increased over a period of 1 year, and India is planning to install 18 petaflop system in the course of this year. So what is a flaps? Okay, what is flaps? Flaps is known as floating point operations per second. Okay, flops is known as floating point operations per second, and they are actually an indicator of processing speed of computers, and petaflop refers to 1,000 trillion flops. Okay, one petaflop refers to 1,000 trillion flops. You have to remember this. You have to remember this because it is important for the exam. Now, flops are actually the floating point operations per second, and they are actually an indicator of processing speed of a computer, and petaflop refers to 1,000 trillion flops. Now, India has been planning to install 18 petaflop systems. Now, processing power, such a degree or such a huge processing power can greatly eases the complex mathematical calculations required. Okay, so it can easily do the complex mathematical equations, and it can also the forecast weather. Now, weather forecasting is very important to give regular weather updates to farmers, to fishermen, and also to various other sectors. And it is also very important to avoid any natural disaster because of cloud burst, flooding, etc. So therefore it can predict, it can forecast the weather 1 or 2 weeks before, or months before, if we have the fastest supercomputers, right, or more sophisticated supercomputers. Currently India's most powerful civilian computers are Pratyush and Mihir. So please remember these two supercomputers, Pratyush and Mihir, and their combined capacity is around 6.8 petaflops. Okay, so the total combined capacity of these two supercomputers is overall 6.8 petaflops. Now, India's target is to install around 18 petaflops systems over a period of this year. However, the Pratyush is managed by Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, that is in Pune, and Mihir is managed by National Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. And Mihir supercomputing is used for weather forecasting, and the Pratyush is used for the mathematical calculations or complex mathematical calculations. So these two, or both Pratyush and Mihir, were made operational in the year 2018. So total investment of these two supercomputers were around 438. Okay, 438 crore. So both these organizations are affiliated to the Ministry of Earth Sciences. So the first organization is Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, and the second organization is National Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. So these two institutions are affiliated to Ministry of Earth Sciences. Now, this 18 petaflop computer is actually imported from France. Okay, so it will be actually imported from France. The new supercomputers yet to be named are imported from a French corporation. Okay, so the name of the French corporation is ATOS, an information technology service and consulting company. The name of the company is ATOS. Okay, so we are importing these supercomputers from France. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi government or the present union government signed a deal in the year 2018 with the government of France. Okay, so the deal is with respect to the procurement of high performance computers worth of 4,500 crore by the year 2025. Now, apart from this, we need to look into some data related to the fastest, the speedy computers, supercomputers across the world. As of now, the fastest high performance computing system in the world is currently the Frontier Cray system. The Frontier Cray system is found in Oak Ridge National Laboratory in United States. However, the top 10 computers, so now the this has a peak speed of 1 exaflop. 1 exaflop is equivalent to 1000 petaflops. Now see, as of now, India does not have even the 18 petaflop capacity of supercomputers, but US Frontier Cray system have around 1000 petaflops of supercomputing speed. You can imagine the difference between these two countries. So the top 10 other systems based on speed range from 400 petaflops to 60 petaflops. Now the top 10 supercomputers across the world are in the range of 400 petaflops to 60 petaflops. Now as of now, India have the only 6 point petaflops powerful or capable supercomputer only. Okay, so India is not featuring in the top 10 list. So this is all about the supercomputers. You have to remember Pratyush and Mihir, and also the fastest supercomputing or the fastest high performance supercomputer, that is a Frontier Cray system. Okay, so the next article is with respect to the National Human Rights Commission. Now, global body keeps National Human Rights Commission waiting over a political meddling. Okay, so political meddling. So there was an alliance called a Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions. Okay, so this is actually an alliance, National Alliance of Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions. So this alliance certifies or accreditates the national human rights commissions or institutions across the different countries, right? So because of the poor record of the National Human Rights Commission in various aspects, the global body keeps waiting over political meddling. Okay, so it has not given accreditation under Paris Principle to National Human Rights Commission. So we will understand what exactly the Paris Principles. Now, United Nations this global alliance of national human rights institution was actually a United Nations recognized body. Okay, this was a United Nations recognized body, and it has deferred accreditation to National Human Rights Commission. Okay, so NHRC India. So it has denied accreditation to National Human Rights Commission India, and it has cited several objections. So the objections include political interference in appointments, involving the police probes into human rights violations, and poor cooperation with the civil society. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why the GANHRI has denied the accreditation to National Human Rights Commission. Okay, so you have to keep in mind all these points: the excessive political interference in the appointments, involving police and probes into human rights violations, and also poor cooperation with the civil society organizations. Now, apart from this, there is a lack of diversity in staff and leadership. And apart from these inefficiencies, there is also insufficient action to protect the marginalized groups, and these are the reasons for deferment of accreditation. Okay, now, apart from that, there were also 7 human rights watchers or institutions. They have wrote to the Global Alliance for National Human Rights Institutions objecting India's A rank. And These seven human rights watchers have also raised several concerns about National Human Rights Commission and its credentials. So those concerns include lack of independence of NHRC, lack of pluralism, lack of diversity, and lack of accountability. And they are actually the contrary to United Nations principles on the status of national institutions, and these principles are also known as Paris principles. In fact, the National Human Rights Commission was established in the year 1993 in compliance with the Paris Principles. Okay, in compliance with the Paris Principles. And these seven human rights watchers or the institutions have wrote to the GANHRI that Indian National Human Rights Commission lack the credibility. Now, this is actually the symbol of the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, and that was set up in the year 1993. The National Human Rights Commission has reportedly failed to deliver its mandate, in particularly protecting the rights of people from marginalized communities, regional, religious minorities, and also human rights defenders. Now, it has failed to deliver its mandate in these areas. Now, the Paris Principles set out six main criteria. The criteria include mandate and competence, autonomy from the government, independence guaranteed by a statute or a constitution. In fact, National Human Rights Commission was formed through a statute. Okay, a statute, National Human Rights Protection of National Human Rights Act 1993. Okay, now the pluralism, adequate resources, and adequate power of investigation. And the National Human Rights Commission also have the power of a civil court. So therefore, the Paris Principles have come up with a main criteria, and the criteria include seven principles. Okay, the criteria include seven or six principles. Okay, six major principles. These are the six major principles. Now, apart from that, the National Human Rights Commission India has been set up under the Protection of Human Rights Act, and that was passed by the Parliament in the year 1993. So, despite the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, this agency has denied accreditation to National Human Rights Commission, but it has categorized India as A category, or it has given National Human Rights Commission A status. Okay, since beginning of accreditation process. It was begun in the year 1999, the accreditation process. Since the beginning, the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions has given India National Human Rights Commission a status A. Okay, A status. Okay, so a good, a well maintained or well managed credibility. Now, it retained in the year 2006, 2011, and 2017, even after the deferment of or accreditation process. Now, the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, through a subcommittee on accreditation, is responsible for reviewing and accrediting national human rights institutions in compliance with the Paris Principles every 5 years. Since it is a UN recognized body, the credentials of each and every country will be scrutinized by other member countries of the United Nations, and that will, help understand how countries are actually committed for the human rights and the human rights protection, and how they have made the human rights protection bodies more and more, you know powerful or efficient. Okay, this is all about the Global Alliance on National Human Rights Institution and its accreditation, denial of accreditation to National Human Rights Commission on various reasons. So the next article is with respect to a Sengol. Okay, so this is with respect to Sengol. Now we need to understand what exactly is Sengol. Recently, a parliament building was inaugurated. Now, in this parliament building, at the speaker's seat, this Sengol will be fixed. Okay, this Sengol will be fixed. Now, what is this Sengol? You can see here how this Sengol looks. So, Sengol is an important historical symbol. Okay, so this is an historical symbol, and that is actually associated with independence of India. Sengol is associated with independence of India. Now, Sengol was used as a symbol of the transfer of power. So it was used as a transfer of power when British declared independence. Lord Mountbatten, he was the last viceroy of India, and having no idea about the procedure that should be followed while transferring the power, and asked Mountbatten asked the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, as to the procedure, what procedure should be followed while transferring power from British government to Indian government. Okay, so he asked about the traditions and rituals that need to be followed while transferring the power. Okay, so Nehru further discussed this issue with the C. Rajagopalachari. Okay, so C. Rajagopalachari, he was the then Governor General, the last Governor General of India. Now, who informed Jawaharlal Nehru about a practice called a Sengol? This is a Tamilian tradition. Okay, this is a Tamil tradition, and that was followed during the Chola period. Okay, the Sengol tradition was followed during the Chola period, where a senior priest presents a sceptre of a newly crowned king. The Sengol is presented to a newly crowned king. Now, after this, the Sengol was imported from Tamil Nadu. Okay, so the spectre has become a symbol of transfer of Sengol power. This becomes the symbol of transfer of a Sengol power. A Sengol was crafted by Vummidi Bangaru Chetty in Tamil or then Madras Presidency. So this was crafted by Ummidi Bangaru Chetty, so a renowned jeweler from Chennai. This sculpture is about 5 feet length and features a Nandi, okay, a bull at the top of this Sengol, and it has been representing the concept of justice and fairness. Okay, so Sengol represents the concept of justice and fairness, and it consists a Nandi or a bull on the top of it. So you can see here, this is the Sengol. On the top of Sengol, there was a bull or Nandi, right? So this represents the symbol of fairness and equality. So this is new parliament building, and Sengol will be instituted in new parliament building at the speaker's seat. So these are all important and relevant news articles for today's discussion. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the bell icon. Thank you.